So thanks for the welcome. Thanks for the warm welcome. Just a quick introduction from my side. Mike Jenkins. I'm a AI ML principal specialist in the go-to-market group. So what I do is I work with customers to be able to understand what they're trying to do with AI ML. And Ron, you hit it exactly. You know, ML is kind of AI is the bigger bucket, and the ML is a subset of that, and then deep learning is a subset even a little further down. And I'll go through what we have as the AI services, the ML services, and the ML frameworks are kind of the three big categories. We've added a fourth now. I'll show you a new slide that we've got. And so I work with a lot of enterprise customers and startups and across the board, everybody that's trying to leverage these tools to be able to get the most from their data and to be able to understand what makes sense of things that are there that they don't know about. I work with a lot of large media companies, and so without further ado, we will get that going. I'm just going to take my webcam off just to give you a sense of full screen, so we get everything in here and get a look. You can still see my screen. Everything's good, Ron?
Yes, I can. No problem.
All right, perfect. Okay, so as Ron mentioned, there's a lot around AI ML. There's a lot of conversations around AI ML. Just what is it? How do I use it? It's the cool thing to do. And so you really need to start with what are your business goals. A lot of times we'll focus on technology, but really what you need to do is you need to start to focus on how do you grow your revenue streams. With AWS, you can rapidly test and iterate new ideas, create new products and services, and reduce your time to market. And it makes collecting information, being able to collect that information faster, and you can make faster decisions based on exposing the data that's there. So if you don't know, machine learning, the machine learning part of AI is where you start to look for patterns in the data. And so as you start to look at the patterns in the data, you can increase each of these bubbles, whether it's growing new revenue streams, whether you're trying to improve operational financial efficiency, or whether you're trying to detect and respond to business risks. So companies want to be able to examine the data that they've got and be able to find the answers, because as we all know, in every org, there are silos of data that the information is stuck in a particular silo, and you can't get it out. So each of these areas are major areas that you need to start with as you go down the machine learning journey. So as you start to think about and the reason that we put the outcome slide up front is that it's not always about the technology. As tech folks, and most of the people on are maybe tech folks, some non-tech folks, but you frequently companies start with what the technology can do, as opposed to what the problem you're trying to solve. And so what we like to do is we like to start with the problem and work backwards. So working backwards is a vital component of AWS's strategy, so that you can work backwards from the problem and then start to put a solution to that. Okay, so how do you reach those business goals? So there's ways that you can go through each of these steps, whether it's in a migration process. So there's something that AWS has implemented a long time ago, called the SOFA, which is the stages of adoption curve. So there may be a migration component of that, where you're migrating existing applications, and you want to be able to dive a little deeper and do some reinvention of your business. So you migrate an existing app, and then you use the money that you saved to be able to reinvent the business. That's a lot of where AI ML work gets done. But it's also around security and compliance and resilience. Now everybody knows that there's ransomware attacks, there's compliance-oriented businesses like banks and financial services companies and healthcare. And so AI can provide kind of the eyes on that, whether it's through AI ops or through ML ops. There's a lot of opportunity to be able to protect yourself through enhanced security. Also, adopting modern application development practices is a key component, and that means going to things like Lambda. If you haven't heard that, there's a function-based language within AWS that you can call on to be able to do things to modernize applications. And so many of the customers that I work with have a large, old line Oracle stack, and They want to break it into microservices, these little services that run, and they follow a modern application development practice. And that is the way that applications are being developed today, and that allows people to have agility and move faster. So as you start to go through the next piece, you gain faster and deeper insight with analytics. So as you have those databases out there, whether it's Redshift or if it's Snowflake or if it's existing databases that you have, that particular data gets organized in a way that you can access that data to gain insights that you could never ever do before. And so that's really, really critical. And the big part of that is being able to organize it for speed and agility. So some of you folks may have heard of what we refer to as two pizza teams. So these microservices, the services that are being delivered. So something like Netflix, most everybody's heard of Netflix. Netflix runs on AWS, and they have a microservices architecture. So they have these small little services that are in kind of a mesh, and they can do that because they can work very quickly on a particular area, and they can organize around those areas, which is why you can get your selection, your movies, whether it's a recommendation, whether it's fast response times. Sometimes when you see that spinning wait sign, I'll say to my wife that Lambda function's not running properly. So you can get at that insight much faster by developing those applications in a modern way. And we'll talk a little bit later about CI/CD pipelines and things like that. And finally, how you reach the goals. The goal is you have to bridge the skills and experience gap, and that's a significant one and a significant opportunity. So a lot of these techniques are new, and a lot of these services are new, and they're doing things that never could be imagined before. And it's incredibly exciting. Some of the things I get to see, particularly in the finance world, I did a large project for a media company around just moving their platform online so they could measure and understand who their customers were better and what the folks were doing, what the folks were interested in, recommending additional information. But building those skills and experience around that is critically important. And as it's a new function, we have to continually build everybody's skills and experience. And as you go through it, you'll see how we do that. So we have some programs that allow you to do that. Okay, so there are challenges. As I mentioned, there are challenges. Challenges is there's more data than ever. So things like some of the manufacturing customers I work with, where there's more data being generated than ever. I forget the exact statistic, but there's more data generated today than in the previous X amount of years. Data is growing exponentially, but people have a problem. You can see by that second bubble that it's stored in silos, as I mentioned, and it's stored across multiple data stores. So it's not just in one particular database, and it's easy to look at and it's easy to access, but it's stored in multiple places because multiple constituents want to be able to access that data. And so ML, machine learning adoption, gets challenged because companies tend to kind of stay by inertia. They stay doing what they're doing, even though the insights are right there in the data, but not having the skills and not having the right tools. And the AWS ML Stack, as I mentioned, there's AI services, ML frameworks, and I'll get into that a little bit as we go through it. But not having the skills to be able to really be able to dive into being able to address those challenges is a real shortcoming and a real opportunity. I mentioned it in the slide earlier. Just data security, privacy is always getting tighter. There's always boundaries being placed on what you can see, whether it's personal information about yourself or about a person's healthcare, or the data privacy and security is a critical issue. And the tools that are built into the AI ML stack and into the data analytics stack are really superior tools that allow you to kind of use encryption. If you want to bring your own encryption keys, you can do that. If you want to use the existing encryption keys that are there, if you want to access things securely, you don't want people to look at the types of algorithms you're building, and conversely, that we can have this explainability. So there are ways to open that up and show people what the methods of the algorithms are, but not necessarily showing them what the code is. So what does a modern data strategy look like with AWS? So you're really trying to modernize, unify, so you can innovate. So the modern data strategy at the center there is being able to take those silos, as I mentioned, and kind of get them into secure data lakes. And so the data lake is a place where you can put all the information, and you don't have to have necessarily the structure of the old world where you had to have everything laid out in schemas and perfectly laid out, as it was going to be. You can kind of pump things into the data lake and then use some of the tools that we have in the data analytics stack and in the machine learning stack, the AI ML stack, to be able to dive into those lakes and pull out the information that you want and surface the insights that you want. And that's the critical part. And so, as I mentioned, there are things like manufacturing companies that I work with that they use the data lake to be able to put this information in. And the data lake is full of information that comes from sensors that come off of machines. So there's a factory running, and there's a load of machines running, and all the machines have sensors, and those sensors collect data about those particular machines. And the sensors can detect when there's a problem. Sometimes it's through a vibration, sometimes it's through a noise, sometimes it's through a signal. And that information is collected from those sensors and dumped into a data lake. And so you can see in the Unify bubble, there's data lakes, but there's also purpose-built data stores that go around it. So we realize that you are going to potentially go to, use the tools that you've been using. So you may use a combination of SQL tools or NoSQL tools to be able to access that data lake so that you can get at the data that you need to get at and stay kind of on this modern strategy platform, data strategy platform. And if you do that, if you modernize and you get into a data lake, you can then start to innovate. As I mentioned, there was the stages of adoption curve, and the innovation is the far end of the curve. So if you think of the kind of your classic hockey stick curve, at the top end of the curve is the reinvention phase of it, and that's where you really start to innovate. So you may be able to do things now that you've come up with a modern data strategy. You can do things in that innovation component that you could never do before, and so you start to have processes that you might not have been able to get. So an example I gave with the media insights, the media consumer insights for a media company, they were able to get at what their viewers were doing, the intention of when they paused the video or clicked on a particular thing. You can start to understand much better what the customer is doing at the endpoint, and from that you can start to do better marketing. You can do better delivery. There's all kinds of things that you can do once you get to that point. So AI with AWS is about innovation, choice, and flexibility. There's 100,000 plus customers that have used machine learning. 250. I'm not going to read these directly, but 250 new capabilities. So the stack is incredibly both wide and deep. So I'll show the 3 or 4 tier cake to you and give you a sense of where you can get started, whether it's just doing service level API calls out to AI services. So things like being able to read the text off of a document, and so OCR it, understand the text, pull the text off, put it into a value pair database, and then be able to leverage that in something like Textract or Comprehend, where you could do natural language processing, NLP. So BERT models are kind of the hot topic of the day. So being able to understand the document without needing to have a human have eyes on the document. So for instance, I have a financial services company that's using NLP and think tools like Comprehend to read SEC filings, so you can look at the filing automatically, understand the sentiment of it, whether it's litigious, whether it's positive or negative, and a whole set of features about what that document is, whereas they would previously have had 100 people reading those documents, understanding them, writing down analysis. Now you can run them through something like Comprehend, and you can actually understand the meaning of that document without a human looking at it, which is pretty incredible when you think about it. It's pretty amazing. So we can do things like reduce your training time as part of the ML solutions. You can scale faster. You get you better throughput. You can do things like AWS has spot instances, and so you can buy instances on the open market, and you can reduce the training. So when you do machine learning and artificial intelligence, one of the big tasks is training the data. And all the training the data means is as you ingest data into a database or into a data lake, let's say it's pictures of cats and dogs, you train the data to understand the difference between a cat and a dog. And so when you look at it and you train that data, you look at as few as 1,000 records or up to hundreds of thousands, where people do terabytes of data that they want to have very highly accurate models. Training becomes a big cost component. And so one of the things that we do is provide spot instances for training that reduce your cost by 90%, which is a really nice component of it. So what does it mean to do machine learning? And I'm going to give you some examples of what we do at AWS, some of the ways that we use machine learning, some of the things that some of our customers do, because there's some really interesting things that people do. So this goes back to what Ron's point was about AI, ML, deep learning. AI is the big category. So if you think that this is the superset category, so it's any technique that enables computers to mimic human intelligence. And so think of things like recognition as one of our AI services. Recognition allows you to do facial recognition. So you can set up a camera, connect recognition to it, train it, automatically use the recognition pre-trained data models, and be able to very quickly just plug into that service, literally by calling an API that lets you do facial recognition. So it's kind of I don't want to say it's plug and play, but it's plug and play for lack of a better description. It's plug and play, and it allows you to access the service. But think of the AI as just as the overall big bucket. Now, as I said, machine learning is a subset of AI. And so the subset is when you start to look for patterns. So if you want to start to look at what that data means, a lot of times you need a lot of data to be able to bring it in, train it, run it through an algorithm, and then take additional data and bounce it against that training set so that you can say, when you have a picture of a cat and you've trained a set of data that identifies the components of a cat, it will actually say this is a cat as opposed to a dog. The next layer down, as I mentioned, is deep learning. So deep learning is when you start to get into neural networks and things like speech and image recognition, and you start to go into more complex applications of artificial intelligence. So it's not just recognizing patterns, it's having multiple layers of nodes that allow you to, so as you saw some of the things previously in the day, things like the speech recognition in Amazon Connect, and being able to do image recognition in AWS recognition, those all have a component of deep learning to them. So the reach of it is really growing. So you can imagine, if you think about the first slide about thinking about your business outcomes, as you really start to think about the patterns that you can recognize and the business applications that you start to be able to have, it's pretty incredible. And so the statistics speak for themselves. So by 2024, IDC predicts 110 billion. The second component there is the middle box is really interesting. So this is what the challenge is today: is how do you go from piloting these things to actually operationalizing it? So one of the areas that I get involved in is moving workloads to production. So what makes something stop moving as you pilot it and it works, and you try to operationalize it? And that's a huge component of what's going on today. There's a lot of work around identifying. You can see the link there. The identifying the issues of how do you actually make this stuff work on a day-to-day basis, and what do you do to have it be used every day and have it be used the way that you want to have it used. The last box, just AI transformation. A lot of people, according to Deloitte, 60% of people say that AI will transform their organizations. And that means as people start to organize and get the data lakes and the data strategy under control, they'll start to use the AI tools in the AWS stack to be able to transform their organizations. So they'll be able to get at insights that they weren't able to get at before. They'll be able to surface information that they could never surface before. So I mentioned the media company. In the media company I worked with, they do content moderation. They may want to go find some content that is in existing data stores, and they're using AI and ML to be able to kind of sift through some of the content so they can surface some of that content more easily than regular search tools or just looking for it in folders. There are ways that you can use AI to be able to surface that. And so as those tools start to become operationalized and much more business outcome focused, you'll see that AI transformation is going to continue to happen. So as I mentioned, the business impact is huge. Whether it's efficiencies that are gained, whether it's making smarter and better decisions, a lot of it is about being faster to the market with whether it's products, the financial markets, healthcare. There's a lot of development in each of these verticals. There's a lot of development about just making smarter, faster decisions. And there are a lot of really good examples that our customers have, and I'll go take you through some of these examples in a few slides here. You can also add new capabilities to existing products, in addition to inventing net new products. So it may be that you have products that would benefit from adding AI capabilities to it, or machine learning capabilities to it, but you can also create totally new products that were really not able to be created before. So as I mentioned, there's some really good examples that we have of what customers have done around the AWS AI ML stack. So in healthcare, as I mentioned, there's Cerner and things like the NFL. So if you've ever seen Next Gen Stats, if you're a football fan, and you'll see that it's driven by AWS, you can see Next Gen Stats driven by AWS. There's a lot of companies that are doing really interesting things. So in Intuit's case, they built some forecasting capabilities to predict call center demand on a particular day and time so that they were staffed properly. So there was no way they could do this before AI and ML. It was an impossible task to solve. So how do you make sure that you have the right number of people on the phone for the calls that have been there that are going to be predicted into the future? In transportation, you've got companies like Level 5 that's you're developing a self-driving system for the Lyft network to provide millions of riders with access to the technology. The company uses Amazon SageMaker, which is our core ML product, to standardize training across the engineering team, where they reduce model time, training time down to a couple hours. As I mentioned, in healthcare, Cerner is a really big healthcare information technology provider. They provide services and devices and hardware, and they tap into our deep into the machine learning and AI services. And so something like Amazon Transcribe Medical, which allows them to surface insights that will help them to provide customers streamlining their operations and making more personalized care. So there's a product called AWS Personalize, which allows you to understand who a user is. If a user comes to your website, you want to provide things like you've seen on Netflix or HBO Max, or a lot of these media companies use SIMs, what are called SIMs, or this is like that. So if you like this, you'll like that. So that's all done through AI. And as I mentioned, in the NFL Next Gen Stats really changes kind of the game, because it provides fans with the ability to look at data that comes across, and it reveals insights about the game's dynamics. So whether it's throwing a pass in the percentage prediction of whether it's going to be completed or not, or speed that something's going to happen, it's really a really great use of SageMaker machine learning to be able to get those stats, to be able to understand what's going on in the game at a level that really previously was never available. And these are just a slight touch of the many customers that are using the AWS AI ML stack to do some pretty amazing things. I see a lot of it, and I'm still amazed day to day by some of the things that are done with it. Also one of the things is Amazon. Many of these things came out of the Amazon experience itself, the Amazon retail. So not AWS, not the AI ML team within AWS, but actual real world problems. If you think back to that first slide and actual outcomes and business outcomes, a lot of these problems originated with the Amazon retail business. So for instance, you've got things like Prime Day, and you have an enormous amount of products sold. How do you recommend what people want, and what recommended things that they might not know about that you could surface because there's a connection between people that bought certain types of things that would like to, we know that other customers would like to buy similar things that they don't know. Additionally, our warehouses, you can imagine the fulfillment centers. In that second picture, 1.6 million packages every day. There's a huge amount of volume that's driven there. Whether it's in the fulfillment process. So we've developed a forecasting system that can predict the appropriate amount of demand for each product that we sell worldwide, which reduces the cost, increases the delivery speed, and increases convenience for customers. And most of you have ordered something on Amazon, so you know this is directly applicable to everybody here. Next one's Alexa. So a lot of this technology is built into Alexa. So how do you leverage the skill? How do you talk to a device and have it be able to interpret, understand, and feed that back? And finally is the first Prime Air, to be able to deliver a package via drone. All of these things incorporate and were real world examples of where the AI ML stack came from. I'm not going to leave this up long. I'm not a big fan of icon slides, but you can see there's a ton of people that are doing many things across the board. Whether it's Condé Nast and travel and magazines, NASCAR, doing a lot of statistical information, Peloton. So when you get on Peloton bike and you do that, that's all built on AWS AI ML stack. Some really interesting things. So AWS is uniquely equipped to handle this because it's the broadest, deepest stack that's out there. And so there's a lot of challenges. I'm not a big fan of reading slides. I'll let you read that slide and see that a lot of the things that you want to do is you want to address the business value, which we've done more than anybody and have more installations. We want to reduce complexity. So the data science teams have a easy workflow that's built into the AWS AI ML stack. The experience that we've had building these tools in the fulfillment centers, across the delivery network, across many companies. There's also ways that, as I mentioned, talent is an important part of this. And so talent is being able to accelerate the journey. We've got things like AWS training. So there's a lot of free training available. There's training on YouTube. There's training on aws.amazon.com. We've got a program called Deep Racer, which lets you kind of teach a race car, a little model race car to be able to drive and run in a race, which is really cool. We also have something called a Solutions Lab that we sponsor certain types of problems where you can, you can get a kickstart on a project that you have in the Solutions Lab. Also, from data, this all starts with the data strategy. As I mentioned earlier, having a data strategy and having the right data strategy to be able to feed this information is really critical, as is being able to have the compute and storage needs to be able to ingest all the information you need and store the information you need. So what does a typical ML journey look like? I've mentioned it as we've gone through these slides, but really, you want to establish a data strategy. You want to establish a modern data strategy, understand where to apply ML, and pick those use cases that are going to benefit the most. Develop your teams with those training programs, as I mentioned. And it's really important, this champion an ML culture. It's really important to find somebody that is going to understand what this journey looks like, understand the people that have to play in the journey, and also kind of keep the vision alive of building a systematic ML culture across the teams. And finally, you want to remove the undifferentiated heavy lifting. So you want to pass off the things like being able to do your training jobs and building and deploying models onto something like SageMaker, so you don't have to worry about the end-to-end process. You just ingest the data, you apply the appropriate algorithm that goes against it, and your team can actually push that through to get insights. So how do you start this journey?
Mike?
Yep.
Is this about the last slide? Because I want to keep it moving along.
Yeah, let me go one or two, and I'll go quick. I'll skip ahead to the three-tier cake because that'll be the kind of the finale.
Okay.
So sorry. So as I mentioned, yeah, you need to establish a data strategy. You need to start with a problem, and you need to work together to get there. Okay, and you need to understand what the use case is, the vertical solutions, being able to build your models. I just want to get to, okay, so here, this is the final slide. And so this is really kind of the critical part. So as you think about the three-tier cake, what we used to call three-tier cake is now four-tier cake. The solutions were added on top of it. The three-tier cake were before were the ML services, the ML platform, and the ML frameworks. So as you want to dip your toe into these services or platforms, you can do so by leveraging the API services, the AI services, excuse me, the AI services. Just by calling the service, you can send pictures to recognition and do facial recognition literally in minutes. It's that straightforward and that easy. If you want to go a little bit deeper and do some of the forecasting and things that are going to require machine learning, you'll go to SageMaker Studio, which is that middle ML platform. And the bottom part is when you start to get into hardcore data scientists and PhDs, and there's a lot of things that are going on there. But that allows you to go as deeply as you want into the data and into the much more advanced technologies. And then finally, the last step is the top tier, is the solutions that tie it all together that address particular problems. So whether it's personalization, whether it's fraud detection, or whether it's an industry solution, each of these solutions are going to use those tools that are beneath it to be able to address each of those issues. And so whether it's addressing it via human interaction through a service platform, by looking at data and interpreting the data and surfacing answers, or leveraging it through the frameworks and infrastructure that are there at the deepest levels for data scientists, the entire thing supports being able to drive each of those business processes. So thanks, Ron. I got caught up in my own excitement there.